This is a video that I originally made a little over 3.5 months ago. And at the time that I made the video, after going back and editing the video, I felt like it was a little rude, so I decided not to post it. But after watching it again and going through several other videos that I have filmed over the past year or so that I did not release, I decided that it's not a good idea to just sit on stuff like this. Like, why else would I go through the trouble to record it, film it, edit it, and then just sit on it? That doesn't make a lot of sense, right? So I've decided to go on and post this video. I added a little bit more to it as far as images and stuff like that. Hope you guys enjoy it. I have more videos, believe me, and they're coming soon. In this video, I want to talk about 5 bands that I no longer listen to. At one time, I was probably heavily influenced by these bands, or I liked to listen to them all the time. But then one day I just woke up and didn't want to hear them anymore. This video is not designed to piss off the members of any of these bands or to piss off any of their fans. It's just sometimes you have to talk about why you just stop listening to certain things, and that's what this video is about. For this video, the list could be too long. There are a lot of bands I no longer listen to. But for this video, I'm gonna keep it short and I'm just gonna go with 5 bands, okay? First one I'm gonna mention, I would say they would be the last band that I would go back and listen to out of this list. First one I'm going to mention is Motley Crue. But they are one of the bands responsible for me listening to metal. There were a few bands that I was introduced to, and those bands had a very, very strong influence on me at the age of 9, 10 years old. And those bands, one of those bands was Motley Crue. I was a huge fan of Shout at the Devil. Along with Motley Crue, there were maybe 2 or 3 other bands, Quiet Riot being one of them, Twisted Sister being the other. These were 3 of the first metal bands I really got into and really got into their sound. Motley Crue, out of those 3 bands, they probably had the least amount of talent, let's put it that way. At their peak, which I think is Theater of Pain, Tommy Lee was always great in that band. I always liked what he contributed. And I liked Vince Neil a lot. I thought he was great, and I thought he was a great front man. I know today these things are arguable, but 2 out of the 4 members of that band have been caught on film saying things that aren't very kind to people of, darker skin color. But that's not really why I stopped listening to them. At the end of the day, I quit listening to Motley Crue because I didn't feel like I was getting anything out of it musically anymore. Like, it was more like party music to me, and there are a lot of other bands that were doing it that are way better. Hello, Rat. That was another band that was, a big influence on me at a young age. And out of all those bands that play that style of hard rock or metal, however you want to call it, I consider it to be metal. Definitely Rat would be pretty much at the top of the list. I still listen to them a lot, but I don't care to listen to Motley Crue again. Okay, moving on. The next band, Pearl Jam. This is another band that when they came around, I was heavily into bands like Nirvana, Dinosaur Jr., Soundgarden. I was more into those bands than I was Pearl Jam. I really kind of forced myself to like Pearl Jam. They seem like really likable people. So this is not anything against them as individuals or their musical talent. Speaking of Pearl Jam, there is a band that came out of Stone Gossard, which is Brad, and I'm a huge fan of Brad. Love them. Love Sean Smith. Miss him. May he rest in peace. But I just never could get into Pearl Jam. I tried. I really did. I didn't really get into 10, their first album, and I just didn't get into it at all. I gave Versus a very strong try. I used to listen to Versus all the time. But by the time, I think it was called Vital, whatever the third release was, I was already out. I'd already signed off from Pearl Jam. But definitely, if you ever can check out Brad or Satchel, I highly recommend it. Sean Smith, who's the lead vocalist for both of those bands, Stone Gossard is connected with those bands. These guys are, they're out of Seattle. Amazing work that Stone Gossard did with Brad. All of my respect to them. I've seen Pearl Jam live a couple times. They were great and all that, but I just don't care to listen to them anymore. Moving on, once again, Phish. Now, here's a band that I was listening to a lot. They were really a pleasure to listen to when I first started listening to them, because they're a musician's band. They're very gifted players. There was one track I used to love to listen to it all the time, and it's called Foam, and I think it's simple bass line. I think it's like... Now, I'm probably doing that in the wrong key. Either way, I just thought that Junta was the greatest album of 90, I can't remember if it was 91 or 92 that it came out. Gotta do my homework, but I'll put it up on the screen. Anyway, my favorite Phish release was an album called Junta. It was a double album. It was kind of like a concept album, and I think it revolved around some girl named Esther and her adventures, or I'm probably mixing some of it up. It's been forever. But I used to listen to this album all the time. I was obsessed with it. I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. But then I rediscovered bands like Steely Dan, Genesis, who I've mentioned multiple times on this channel. And honestly, I was like, why am I listening to Phish when I can just listen to Genesis, or I can listen to Steely Dan, or any of these other prog rock groups, the Grateful Dead. Everyone compares them to the Dead, but there's so much more to Phish than the Grateful Dead. Anyway, once again, here's another band with great musicians. I'm sure they're great people. I heard that they did a tour where they played Talking Heads' Remain in Light from start to finish. I thought that was really cool to hear about that. I never saw it myself. I did see their Watcher of the Skies cover where Genesis was out in the audience watching, and I saw Tony Banks just sitting there like, I think that Phish is a good band, and they have tons of fans. So, hey, I was there. I was a fan with you guys. I loved these bands, but I just had to move on, as I'm doing right now on this list. This was probably the shortest lived band in my collection. I have almost all of their work up until a certain year. That year probably being, I don't know, maybe 2013 or so. And that band is Band of Horses. I heard their music one evening somewhere and picked up on it and said, wow, this is pretty cool. And I went out and got their stuff, and started listening to their music and really enjoyed it for a while. I'm trying to think right now of which album was my favorite to listen to. I remember somebody saying, oh, I want to listen to this music, and he played it. And I was like, this is Band of Horses. And he looked at me like I was from outer space. Like he couldn't believe that I so quickly was like, oh yeah, this is Band of Horses. But yeah, I used to like them. I was never a fan. I never went to any of their shows. I never saw them live. But I did like their music, and I'd listened to it for a while. I think it's important to, check out your contemporaries from time to time and listen to them and hear what they're doing. And I was really getting into this band and liking what they were doing, but there were so many other bands that were contemporaries, and they were, quite frankly, a little bit more innovative to me. And I just felt like one day I just woke up and just didn't want to hear this band anymore. Like I said, once again, nothing against the band or their fans. I'm sure they're really nice people, but I just moved on. I just woke up one day and just decided, this happens with a lot of things with me. I guess, some people accuse me of being fickle. Maybe I'm just a fickle person. But anyway, and the number one band, and I was playing their bass line in the beginning, is 311. This band, I saw them multiple times. Countless times I saw them back in their early days. I even hung out with them a few times. I used to really be a pretty big fan of this band. And I thought that what they were doing at the time, it just worked. It just fit. It was before I started to burn out on the whole fusion of rap meets alternative metal, if that's a good description of that band. But when I first heard them, it was just back in those days. And here's another band I'm gonna mention right now that I used to listen to all the time. I don't listen to them anymore, the Beastie Boys. But you know, I was just really into that whole scene and the party scene, and bands like Happy Mondays, which I can still listen to Happy Mondays and not, you know, be like, oh, why did I ever listen to them? I still like them, you know. But, you know, there's this era like from like 92 through say maybe 96. It was just like the music was all about partying and, you know, throwing in some rhymes and a little bit of hip hop with it. And for somebody who doesn't have much of a history or knowledge of hip hop and all that, it was really fun for me. And I know that these guys were getting a lot of their stuff from a lot of other legendary hip hop artists. I get all that, and, you know, rappers and the whole nine. But I just woke up one day and just said, you know what, after about 3 albums in, I was just done. By the 3rd album, I just couldn't feel it anymore. And I was just like, I'm moving on. Once again, not to piss off their fans or anyone in that band, I'm gonna say right now, if you know who I am or you remember me, I really liked your band. We hung out many times. We had some great times together, and I had some great times to your music, but I just had to move on. I just changed like what I was into, what I wanted to hear. And still to this day, most of what I want to hear came out before 1990 anyway. So it's nothing against any of the acts that are on this list. Those are 5 bands, even though I threw in a bonus band, that being the Beastie Boys, but those are 5 bands that I used to listen to and be somewhat of a fan of, except for one that I no longer care to listen to anymore. All right, I'll have another video out to you guys soon. Thank you for watching.